Okay, so this time around, as promised, we'll be covering respiration. So what is respiration? Put simply, respiration is your body's method of producing ATP, which is energy. It does this in two methods, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. We'll start with aerobic respiration. Put simply, aerobic respiration is the generating of energy via the use of oxygen to make ATP. You will have to memorize this formula. It's not too complicated. This is glucose combined with oxygen makes carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. ATP being the energy. All of this happens in the mitochondria. Mitochondria is you can envision it as the powerhouse of the cell. You don't have to know this, but it's just basically a summarization of anaerobic and aerobic respiration. So just this on its own is anaerobic respiration. It creates Peruvian acid as well as lactic acid as waste products and generates only 2 ATP. And in stark contrast, this is when the mitochondria undergoes a aerobic respiration. So first it goes through the Krebs cycle as well as the beta oxidation phase, and that in itself is when oxygen is induced and carbon dioxide is used as waste, and as the final product it generates 2 ATP. And once it's created the NADH, it then goes into the electron hydrogen transport system, also known as just the electron system, transport system, and that is when the water is given off, and this part here happens in the inner membrane, and that generates 34 ATP. Again, for IGCSE, you do not require the knowledge of this. All you have to know is that anaerobic respiration makes 2 ATP, in a stark contrast to the 36 ATP created by aerobic respiration, right? And even then, you don't even have to know the precise details, which is like 36 ATP and 2 ATP. You just have to know that aerobic respiration is far more productive. This is the real equation, I suppose, the real balanced equation, but again, you don't have to know this. Anaerobic respiration. Basically, it's when you don't require oxygen. However, as mentioned before, it is insufficient and only provides 2 ATP. Circumstances in which you'd use this is, for example, if you're running a marathon, once you start to slow down and you feel cramps, that's when your body starts to undergo anaerobic respiration, because it doesn't have a sufficient supply of oxygen. Now, it produces, you don't have to know this either, this is just a small little visual as to how this undergoes, but basically, glucose enters the cell, the cell breaks it down into glycolysis. Lysis means breaking apart. You should know that from the topic 1 of IGCSE. For example, in animal cells. But anyhow, I will probably cover that as well. And that in itself generates that 2 ATP. However, and yes, animals do in fact undergo fermentation. The fermentation process that has to happen in order to produce the energy creates lactic acid. To summarize, all you need to know is that it creates low energy, right, with only glucose, right, and it gives off a waste product of lactic acid, after which this lactic acid leaves the cell. And you do have to know the formula for lactic acid, which is 2 carbon 3, hydrogen 6, and oxygen 3. So, once it leaves, there is this concept biologists use, which is oxygen debt. Oxygen debt is basically when your body requires oxygen once it has a sufficient supply to break down the lactic acid that was created. And this can occur, for example, once you've finished a marathon, for example. So you were running for a very long time, you were puffing, and once you finish the finish line, you collapse. And your legs, they feel really stiff. That's because of the lactic acid. It causes pain and cramps. And you continue puffing. Even though you've finished running, you continue puffing. That is your body repaying its oxygen debt caused whilst you were running the marathon. And you will have to memorize this formula, which is basically the formula for anaerobic respiration. So glucose causes lactic acid plus 2 ATP. And that's pretty much it. It isn't a very long subject or topic. Please enjoy.